very interesting is also the latest one we published it's just in October, about the scattered minds. And the extraordinary thing you are telling about is that the fact that ADHD is not genetic, it's not a genetic illness.
First of all, it's not an illness, okay? Illness is one way of looking at it. I was diagnosed with it when I was in my 50s. And it explained, or it seemed to describe a lot of things about me. Difficulty paying attention when I wasn't interested, being easily bored, difficulty sitting still, poor impulse control, addictive behaviors, tuning out, absent-minded a lot, you know? That's me. Mm-hmm. And then 2 of my kids were diagnosed. So it looked like it's a genetic disease, right? Mm-hmm. But I didn't believe that for a minute. Why not? Because tuning out is not a disease. Let's go back to my example. If I were to, Unia and Christina, if I were to attack you now,
yes,
insult you, stress you somehow, what would be your options? What could you do?
Well, we would defend ourselves or escape the situation.
Exactly. You would hang up.
Yes.
Or you would say, you can't talk to me that way. But what if I kept doing that and you couldn't fight back? And you couldn't.
Eventually, I guess we would ignore it and think of something else.
Tune out. You would tune out. You would, your mind would go absent as a way of protection.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
It's not a disease. It's a protective mechanism. Now think of my infancy and the bombing and the Germans, the Nazis deported Jews, and my father's away in forced labor, my grandparents deported to Auschwitz and died there, my mother depressed and terrorized in a terrible state of mind, hunger. Could I escape? Could I fight back? No. My brain tunes out. Mm-hmm. But when is my brain tuning out? When my brain is being developed.
Okay.
Because what we know now, this is pure science again, and this is one of these scientific certainties that are not taught in the medical schools. I don't know why not. But the human brain develops in interaction with the environment. So which circuits in the brain develop and how well they develop has to do with the emotional environment. That's just a scientific fact. So under those conditions, and my brain is developing and I'm tuning out a lot, the tuning out becomes programmed into my brain. So it's a defense, but it gets programmed in. And once it gets programmed in, it stays there.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Then 50 years later, I'm diagnosed with this so-called disease. Well, then you say, what about your children? Well, my children didn't grow up in wartime. They grew up in a peaceful city.
Yes.
In a functioning family. They were not abused, but they had a father who was a workaholic. When he was at home, he was depressed. A mother who was anxious. Parents who were very stressed with each other as a result of what happened to us as kids. And so our children are very sensitive. How do they deal with all this stress? They tune out. When do they tune out? When their brains are developing. So not diagnosed with it. Okay. It's not a disease, it's a trauma response.
Yeah.
And it also means that, now that's the first point. The second point is, if you look at the literature, I'm pretty sure, I haven't studied Germany, but if you looked at the number of kids being diagnosed with ADHD in 50 years ago and now, it's much more now.
Yes.
Now, that means it cannot be genetic because things do not change in 50 years or 100 years.
Absolutely.
What's going on? What's going on?
Yes.
It's become much more stressed.
Yeah.
This is a very stressed society, whether in Germany or anywhere in the globalized materialistic world.
Yeah.
So parents are under much more stress. And that means their kids are under much more stress. And that means the kids' brains are being affected.
Mm-hmm.
It also means that when we diagnose a child, we shouldn't be treating the child like you got
Yes.
the disease. We should be looking at the environment.
Yes.
And saying, what kind of environment can we create
Yes.
to promote the healthy development of the brains of our children? That means it means in the kindergarten, it means in the school.
Yes.
That means emotional, unconditional acceptance, supporting a child's expression of emotion, lots of free play. Now, look what we've done in this society. Kids don't play anymore. They have this.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
This is addictive. It's not play. Play is creative. It's not gadgets. It's out there in nature.
Mm-hmm.
More and more kids don't get that anymore. Therefore, more and more kids are being diagnosed with, and parents are stressed economically and socially and politically. As human beings, we never developed in nuclear families.
Yeah.
We developed in small band hunter-gatherer groups where there was uncles and aunts and, cousins and a whole community. The African saying, it takes a village to raise a child. Well, now parents are way too stressed. Parents are isolated very often. Often they both have to work. They don't see the kid the whole.
Yes.
And when they come home, they're stressed. The kids are stressed, and more kids are tuning out, or they're more anxious. So that's what's going on.
So you're talking about this, you're traveling around, giving speeches and so on. A lot of people are following you, reading your books. And I think this is a very important point you're talking. Do you think there will one day change anything, that people more and more will be aware about this big problem? On the one hand, I think people are more aware about. And on the other hand, it seems that stress will go on and nothing will change ever. What's your personal view our vision for our future?
Well, I agree with you. I think both things are happening. Stress in the society is increasing. My new book that I just finished writing 2 weeks ago, the title is The Myth of Normal, Trauma, Illness, and Healing in a Toxic Culture. I think we live in a toxic culture. So I think stresses in this culture are getting worse and worse and worse and worse. As a result of which, more people are asking questions, and more people having to wake up that this is not quite right. Something's going on. So I think, on the one hand, I think things are getting worse, and I think they're going to get worse. But on the other hand, I think more and more people are going to be forced to wake up and look at and start asking questions and start seeing if there aren't some better ways to be as human beings and ways to conduct ourselves as a society. So I think the crisis, the Chinese symbol for crisis is made up of two symbols. One is for danger and the other is for opportunity. So I think we're going through a crisis now, and in Western culture. But I think that same crisis is creating an opportunity to look at things differently. And it's, in fact, is forcing us to look at things differently.
Let's go one step back to the ADHD. And you wrote in your book about that especially children who are high sensitive are affected by, is it true? Could you please say something about?
Yes, I'm glad you asked that. Thank you. Because there's one thing that's genetic. That's sensitivity. Okay. And sensitivity, again, this comes from a Latin word, sensere, to feel.
Yeah.
People feel more.
Okay.
Now, give you an example. If you tap yourself on the shoulder right now, it would hurt. But imagine if your shoulder was bare and there was a burn there so that your nerve endings were close to the surface. no, you tap yourself with the same force. You'd have excruciating, severe pain, even though the tap was the same. But you were more sensitive, you felt more. Now, sensitivity is to a large degree genetically determined. So the more sensitive you are, the more you feel, which is that when you're hurt, you're more hurt.
Yes.
So then you have to tune out even more. And the same thing is true, by the way, not just for ADHD, but for all mental health problems.
Yes.
In my new book, I talk about that none of these conditions like depression, anxiety, or bipolar illness, or schizophrenia are genetic. I could go on a great length to talk about why not and how mistaken the assumptions are. But basically, my view is that what you get, what is genetic is sensitivity. And then what happens, how that sensitivity shows itself. Now, sensitivity can show itself, by the way, through creativity and art and music and dance and play and emotional intelligence, if the circumstances are right. But if the circumstances are hurtful, then it becomes more rigid and it becomes more and more. So that's what I think is the basis of that's the genetic contribution is sensitivity, I think, and that probably refers to about 20% of the population. That doesn't mean that other people can't get sick or can't get mentally ill.
Yeah.
But it takes more.
Yes, yes. Okay. Of course, understand. But what could they do with these people to protect themselves more? Once in the speech you told about a wisdom about that you should take shoes on your feet, that the ground you are walking on is not the reason that you're hurt on your feet, on your ground on your feet.
That's a statement of a Hindu, Ramana Maharshi. He was a great spiritual teacher.
Yes.
And he said that if when you're walking outside and your feet hurt all the time, things you could do. You could wrap the whole world in burlap.
Yes.
or you can get a pair of shoes, you know?
Yes. Okay. It's a nice picture.
What he was talking about is you can develop the strength to deal with it rather than trying to stay away, trying to change the whole world. You could actually just develop, learn how to be self-protected. Self-protected, not in a defensive and rigid way, but by actually growing, by actually opening up and learning to become yourself. So now it's not a question. It's not just a question of what should a sensitive person do. It's also what should society do with a sensitive person.
Yeah.
Sensitive kids need special care. They need even more security. They need even more understanding. And usually they get the opposite. I mean, how many times are people told, don't be so sensitive?
Yes.
That's like telling them, don't have such brown eyes, or, don't have such fingers, They're told, don't be yourself. Well, they need to be encouraged to be themselves.
You suggest these new pathways for healing. What about therapists? Are they open for that new pathways? What do you think?
Well, look, there are lots of therapists out there, and some of them are good and some of them are not so good. It depends on how they're trained. A lot of them are trained to deal only with behaviors. But they're not trained to understand the whole unity of everything.
Okay.
So, no, in Munich, there's a therapist called Franz Ruprecht. I don't do therapy the way he does, but I really like the way he does it. Okay? And so what I'm saying is, I'm just giving him as one example, as there's lots of good therapies out there. And then there's lots of bad therapies out there. So if you ask me, do therapists understand it? The answer is some of them do and some of them do not. As a child in Budapest, I learned German, you know, but ich habe ganz vergessen. And then when we left Hungary, we stayed in München for a month before we came to Canada. So I'm really, really glad to have my books published in German.
Okay.
And we're very, very happy to be the German publisher. And thank you so much for taking the time today. And thank you so much for spreading your understanding of all these important topics and so much hope to the audience.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.